This week's episode of the Autoblog Podcast is brought to you by the Autoblog Daily Digest. It's a great way to stay updated with what's happening in the world of cars in just 2 or 3 minutes every day. Ask your smart speaker for the Autoblog Daily Digest to stay up to speed with the latest car news, or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to the Autoblog Podcast. I'm Greg Migliore. Joining me today is road test editor Zach Palmer and news editor Joel Stocksdale. Guys, it's spring. It's going to be 80 today. What's up?
I am driving a big old crossover with winter tires on it right now, actually. So it's not exactly with the weather, but I am excited. I'm probably going to hop outside and work in the sunshine later.
'Tis the season. How about you there, Joel?
Yeah, I'm probably going to try and knock out some mowing this evening because I need to get that done before a road trip I've got coming up this weekend.
Very cool. Very cool. This early in the season, I get a little curmudgeonly about cutting the grass. I'll do it. Then I'm like, no, it's April. You don't need to do it for another couple weeks, but really this is when the grass grows quickly. Get a good podcast like the Autoblog Podcast, and you'll be done before you know it. So coming up on today's show, we're going to talk about the 911 Turbo, a lot cooler than mowing the grass. The Volkswagen Passat, which, 4 wheels and an engine, it's probably cooler than mowing the lawn. And an Avalon Hybrid, which may not be more fun than cutting the grass. I kid. It's a little more buttoned down, but, important car for Toyota. It definitely continues their hybrid strategy. Let's see, we've got some news items. We're going to debate whether Lincoln does need the Zephyr. I say they do. We'll see if these guys agree with me or disagree with me. I hope they do. And we'll talk about the Hyundai Kona N, which was just revealed today. We're recording this on Tuesday. Honda's previewing the interior of, basically for Honda, but we're also going to see the new Civic this week. So by the time you listen to this, head back to Autoblog. You'll get way more information about what is up with the new Civic. And of course, we've got a long-term update on the TLX, which finally we've all driven it. I'm excited. For a while, I was the only one who had driven this car, and it was like I was talking to myself on the podcast, which is, not really something you want to do, at least not and record yourself anyway. Finally, we'll spend some money, but before that, let's get into all of it. 911 Turbo, that's a lot of fun. What did you do with it there, Zach?
Yeah, I went fast in it a lot. This thing is without a doubt the fastest car I have ever driven. It is legitimately on the level of, very, very expensive supercar quick. Porsche says 0 to 60 in 2.7 seconds with launch control. It feels as fast, if not faster than that, honestly. There's no doubt that you are getting all $176,000 that you are paying for with this car. I basically just treated it as a daily driver for a whole week, and that's the other beautiful thing with the Turbo. It's been an awesome grand tour for a long while now. You hop in it, and it's not this super crashy, stiff race car like thing. You can take it to the racetrack and it'll really, really dominate out there, but you can also just cruise around town with it, have a good time. And it won't beat you up anywhere. You can take it for long journeys. You get okay fuel economy. It's definitely not as good as like a 911, just a regular Carrera. But, it's still just a 3.8 liter twin turbo flat six. This year with 572 horsepower. Of course, they just keep getting more and more horsepower out of that. I think it's up 32 horsepower over the previous turbo. This year it's actually not it's not a totally separate engine from the standard Carrera, just because the base Carrera is now a twin turbo itself. So this is just the capital T turbo. The new 3.8 liter in this one is actually based off of that engine, which is just sort of neat. They're they're still in the same family. I sent my review over to our West Coast editor, James, the other day. I didn't have many bad things to say about it at all, honestly. That's typically how it goes with every Porsche that you hop in these days. They don't make a bad one. I had just a really, really splendid time. Mine was in this racing yellow. Had a whole lot of Porsche exclusive extras on it, carbon fiber roof, a whole lot of Turbo S extras on it, actually. You pay another, I think it's $32,000 more that you could pay for the Turbo S with the 640 horsepower. But, a lot of the things that come standard with that model, you can actually get as options on the regular Turbo, which is pretty neat. And mine had it. So honestly, as far as it goes, like mine was as close to a Turbo S as you could get without the extra horsepower added onto it. I mean, if you're looking at something like this, you're also in the same price segment as something like a Lamborghini Huracan, or some of the cheaper McLarens. And if what you really want is to just go as fast as humanly possible, this thing is right there with all of them, if not better. The launch is addicting. I mean, I honestly, of all the things that really stand out about this car, just the smack in the back, and then it honestly, it's like the closest thing to what I feel a fighter jet like taking off of one of those barges out in the sea feel like when you have to accelerate in such a short distance of time. It's almost like you're lifting off. The thing is just so crazy fast. I know that as I was doing some research here, the 0 to 100s that other magazines have tested, they're getting at 0 to 100 in the mid 5s, which I mean that's 0 to 100 a couple seconds quicker than what my personal car does 0 to 60 in. So it's
that sounds like a lot of fun to try that exercise.
Little perspective, yeah.
It's funny when you talk about comparing, like we compare cars to all sorts of things, that, sometimes get a little cliched, but fighter jet for a car like the 911 Turbo, I'd buy that. You really talk about a very capable car that's precise, that certainly creates a sense of, maybe not awe, but definitely a sense of excitement, a sense of purpose when you drive it. So, that's Porsche is, I think, really getting the 911 right now, which is obviously what they have to do. They certainly can never afford to whiff on this. Let's put it that way. I mean, I think, when you look at Porsche as a brand right now, you could maybe debate like, well, how does the Panamera or, the Cayenne or the Macan, some of those like other products that sort of pay the bills, maybe you do like some obsession or hand wringing over, is this a Porsche? How does this translate the Porsche DNA? But then when you drive a 911, especially like a turbo, you don't even have to think about that. So.
Yeah, no, I mean, a car like this, you get in it, and the really amazing thing about it is just how easy it is to drive. I mean, how accessible they make this amount of horsepower. I mean, it isn't tougher to drive, than a regular 911 in any way. You hop in it, and while you are going from corner to corner much quicker, and you have to be cognizant of that fact on the brakes, it is, just so easily accessible for anybody out there who is, driven fast cars and understands the speed of it. So it's pretty incredible where we're at these days with the supercars that are out there.
This would, to me, meet the qualification of being supercar, at least supercar territory.
Yeah.
But one thing I think is very brilliant about the 911, and frankly the Boxster and Cayman as well, is that they don't have to be the highest powered version for you to feel very rewarded driving them. take the base engine, the Boxster is like what, 300 or something, just in the lower one, the Cayman. You're talking about cars that, will not rip your head off, but it's just enough power to feel very sporty, feel engaged, feel connected, and have a hell of a good time. So, I think that's, really sort of a tribute to what Porsche is getting right with their dynamics. And, because it's not always easy to get that recipe right. You can drive a powerful mid-size sedan or SUV, and it's like, well, that thing said it had 350 horsepower, but it was 48 to 5,500 pounds, and, it was weighed down, and it's clearly, you're just doing that to like sort of meet a minimum. Whereas I think Porsche does a good job of tailoring, this car is quick, it's fast, it's obscenely fast, and they can sort of tailor it to have the right like dose, if you will, and the right formula, regardless of the price point or, what that car's precise mission is. So,
yeah, I've really noticed that with pretty much every different Porsche version that you drive. You hop in a Cayenne, like a base Cayenne, and you're still going to have a really, really good time. The E-Hybrid is fantastic to drive. And then, you get all the way up to the Turbo S. And, it almost starts to feel like a broken record as a reviewer at a certain point, because it's like, well, okay, they executed this version really well. They executed this version really well too. So yeah, I guess you could say that Porsche is on a roll. They've sort of been on a roll for decades at this point. If you go back and read reviews from so long ago, we're all saying the same things today as we were back then. So.
Yeah, I think, it's, I think there's still an aura to driving a Porsche. You're excited to drive one. People who call Porsches Porsches call them Porsches, if you will, still like get excited about the brand, still understand like, oh, he's driving a Porsche. Okay. That's a cool thing. And actually, that's what makes me quite excited. I've not driven the Taycan yet, and that is, I think, on my short list of cars I really want to get behind the wheel of, because, it's everything we've talked about electrified. So, that to me is a really compelling really compelling proposition. So, Joel, any thoughts on the 911? You didn't drive this one, but, you want to jump in here?
I mean, kind of what you guys have all said. I don't know what it is, but Porsche just knows how to make a car drive really, really well. And like, it can almost be a little bit annoying that like they can't miss. They always seem to nail it. I mean, that's great for Porsche buyers and stuff, but sometimes it's like, man, are you guys even human? You guys just keep nailing it over and over and over again.
Yeah, I know.
To be a little skeptical here, the Panamera has received a fair amount of criticism, if you will, over its life. Every single thing they've done hasn't been universally loved. And some of it, to be fair, hasn't been, justified. I think a lot of people think in the Panamera, I'll admit, is the easiest low-hanging fruit in the Porsche lineup to sort of, get fired up about. Some of it hasn't been justified. Porsche will say, this is our sedan. And people are like, they're not mad about the car. They're mad about, why is Porsche making a sedan? And I feel like we're so past that. We're in this like post, modern sense of, the number of doors or shapes defines your brand. If Aston Martin can do the DBX, you got to be okay with Porsche doing a crossover.
Well, let me clarify. So, when it comes to making a car drive well,
yeah,
Porsche just hits it every time. Even the first generation Panamera, which was a really ugly thing.
Mm-hmm.
Not a single person really complained about the way it drove. It still drove like a Porsche, even though it was an ugly thing. And I mean, that's the thing that they're so consistent with, is that it just always really drives well.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a great point. It was sort of what I was I was mentioning when I said I was feeling like a broken record on every single Porsche review that I write. It's like every single time, steering feel, nailed it. Throttle, perfect. Engine sounds fantastic. Handling, like everything is there. And but yeah, no, I do agree. I mean, the design is probably the one area where I take the most issue with some Porsches. That and the price, of course. But there's a reason they're so expensive, because every competitor that you get into, you compare it to the Porsche, and the Porsche just tends to drive better. Whether it's a little bit better or a lot better depends on the segment, but Porsche always has driving dynamics in its corner.
The steering, the sound of the engines, even the lesser powered ones, the throttle response. I mean, all the things you just laid out there, Zach, I think is something. Those are things they really get right, and that really communicates, who they are to the driver, to the way you operate the cars. It's not a cliche to feel connected to your Porsche. So, in ways other cars don't necessarily translate. I really like the Jaguar F-Type. I think they got so many things about that right. But in some ways, including, to back up, that they made a legit spiritual successor to the E-Type, which is almost, to me, impossible. Like, how do you follow up one of maybe the 5 or 10 greatest, or at least most beautiful cars ever, and do it in the 2010s? I mean, that's a really tough ghost to chase down, if you will. That being said, the car is, I think, quite raw. There's nothing about it that approaches Porsche levels of handling. There's some compromises there. It's sort of like a very modern, raw, in a way, hot-rodded car, as opposed to some of the true, handling characteristics you could get from a Porsche. And you see that in other sports car applications, and that's just one example. I mean, even driving the Aston Martin DB11, which does compete with some 911s, actually, depending on the price point. It's a beautiful car. I, probably might pick it over some Porsches just because it's an Aston Martin. If you're talking about brand image and scarcity and rarity and like, what does the car do? That definitely gets its own rarefied air. But the steering, in that car didn't blow me away. The looks are certainly otherworldly to my eyes. Interior, not so much. Didn't sound as good in some ways as some 911s do. So, Porsche's having a moment to kind of bring it all together, and it certainly manifests itself in the 911.
I'm sure that the Volkswagen Passat you were driving the other week has just as good a steering feel and speed, right? Yeah.
Good segue. What I look at the Passat, my big takeaway is that the midsize car segment is actually quite good these days, even though it tends to be shrinking. Passat was very nice. I liked it. The trunk is huge. Interior is okay. Mine had the 2-liter turbo 4. This is the R line, so it looked pretty good. You get a lot of stuff on it. The car starts about 31, depending on what you get. One of the funny options I just discovered is you could get a coat hanger for $65, which seems like exorbitantly like a waste of money. I assume it's a pretty nice coat hanger, but I think the plastic ones that you could get at Target or the dollar store, for that matter, would do the job just as well. Maybe this one has some brilliant German engineering to keep your suits wrinkle-free and in place, because a lot of times I'll hang up a blazer and they'll fall down. My car did not have that, but I thought that was kind of a funny option when I was trying to build one here. I mean, to me, this is right in the middle of the pack. I drove the Accord last week or 2 weeks ago, and I would put the Accord ahead of it. I would put the Mazda 6 ahead of it. This to me sort of falls in that middle pack where most of the cars I think look pretty good in this segment. But this is right in there with maybe like the Legacy. I'd probably put it ahead of the Altima. Camry is, I gotta admit, probably better, although this I think is more interesting than the Camry. The Kia K5 is kind of an interesting one. If you want something a little bit different, you can, step up to, like a full-size sedan, which I don't think anybody's doing these days. Step down to something more like a Civic and have a little bit more fun. But yeah, I mean, that's just, to me, that's where this sits in the segment. Like if you're into, like, I'd say Volkswagens, if you're into like German cars, which a lot of people are, and maybe they're not ready to get up to a BMW or an Audi or a Mercedes yet. I think Volkswagen still has some of that, almost like quirky college professor sort of, vibe about it. It's almost like the thinking person's car, you're buying something different, it's, got that import vibe, if you will. So I think that's where Volkswagen can still make some hay. I actually even wrote about that in my review of the ID4, which is the last Volkswagen I had driven previously, saying, hey, you don't need to take down the Mach-E, you just need to be Volkswagen and do that electrified. Maybe don't be Volkswagen, if you will, but be Volkswagen with a K. All of that is to say that the Passat is a pretty good car. Maybe I'm a little quirky, so this is something that if I was looking for a mid-size sedan, I would probably have it on my, it wouldn't be the one I would get. Let me put it that way. For me, it would come down to the Accord or the Mazda. But this would be in my top probably 5 or 6 that I would at least test drive, because this might be the car for you. There's nothing really remarkable about it. That 2-liter turbo is quite nice. Interior is pretty good. Maybe even a little better than some in the class, but it's also a little bit austere, even boring. But it's quite nice. I'll say that. It's elegant. I've driven Audis that weren't this nice. Let's put it that way. And I think that's where the R-Line kind of gets in there and dresses things up. I didn't find the handling particularly remarkable either way, not like your 911. So yeah, just a good middle of the pack car. And I don't mean that derisively in any way. It's just the midsize sedan segment is sort of filled with these. And I think a lot of it comes down to, like, if you're not going to go with the Camry, the Accord, or maybe say, hey, I want the Mazda, you probably immediately go back to this, like I said, the middle of the pack, and pick one of these based probably on either what you drove before, how they look, or whatever kind of deal you can get. So that's kind of how I would bring the Passat together. Worth being on your medium list, but probably definitely not the number one thing in the segment. So.
Yeah, no, I recall that we had, a bit of a conversation about the Passat and the Arteon, maybe 2 months of podcasts ago. And just looking at obviously Volkswagen is selling these two mid-size sedans / the Arteon is technically a hatchback here. And the conclusion was sort of as in well, the Arteon is this super strange niche, and it's so expensive. And well, if you're going to buy the Volkswagen, maybe you should just look at the Passat if you want this 4-door sedan, because you're going to save over $10,000 plus on the sticker, and not necessarily what you get on the Arteon is worth that. But really, I mean, what it's sounding like from what you're saying, and I'm sort of the same thinking as hey, if you're looking, maybe just buy a Honda Accord. And we just land at that every time, it seems, especially because the Accord is just so big these days. I mean, the Passat has always been a very, very large. Well, I mean, okay, so it's been a large sedan ever since they Americanized it with this previous generation, and it got super, super big. And now the Accord is super, super big too. So, and with the Honda, you get really good driving dynamics, more engine options, and I sort of prefer the styling of the Honda over the Passat too. I know that Volkswagen has actually announced, I want to say it's 22 or 23, that the Passat is actually going out of production in its current form, and it'll probably, if they replace it with anything, it'll probably be electric, would be my guess, with how Volkswagen is going. If we do get a replacement, so I don't know if I'll be that sad to see it go. I don't know about you guys.
I mean, yeah, probably not, to be perfectly honest. What do you think, Joel?
Well, this is the thing about the Passat. I think it's fine. There's really not a whole lot about it that would make me like really recommend it to somebody. Like if you want kind of the ultimate all-rounder, you should buy an Accord. If you want something with some style and some driving dynamics, I'd say buy a Mazda 6. And then probably after that, I would maybe recommend the Hyundai Sonata or the Kia K5, both of which are super stylish, super comfy, just all around really nice cars. And then we're kind of getting down to like Camry, Altima, and Passat level. And I think I would probably go with the Camry. I think it drives better. Because I drove this current Passat when it was revealed back at LA a couple of years ago. And I mean, it felt like pretty much what I expected. Like, certainly very comfortable on the highway and lots of space, but that's kind of all it really had going for it. And they've also dropped the V6 option that they used to have, which was kind of a charming, if slightly old and thirsty, engine option that offered a little bit of interest to it, because V6s are kind of disappearing across the board. Really, is like the only offering now in the Camry, I think, because the Altima went to a big turbo for its top of the line one. The Mazda 6 has a big turbo as its top of the line, and so does the Accord.
And the Legacy is a 4-cylinder turbo too.
Yeah,
I can't think of any V6s. But no, that you mentioned that, I'm remembering that Passat GT that they came out with a few years ago. That was a cool Passat. That was a Passat that got pretty good reviews when it came out, and was legitimately quick. I recall 0 to 60 around like 6 seconds. That's something that you can actually be super excited about and be like, hey, this or an Accord 2-liter turbo, Mazda 6 turbo, sort of all in the same discussion, and got some of that GTI-ish like looks and interesting, something interesting about it, because right now it's just very plain Jane, and there isn't much to get excited about as an enthusiast for the car.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that Passat GT was kind of a surprise because it was mostly a suspension kit and an exhaust and some styling stuff, but it actually worked pretty well. I remember driving it and having quite a bit of fun with it. But yeah, that's gone. I don't know. It kind of feels like the Passat is just sort of, I don't know, coasting to the end.
Speaking of coasting, did you do any coasting in the Avalon Hybrid? I don't know if it has such a feature, but we'll step up one segment here, go to a larger car, go over to Toyota. What did you think of that thing?
I was pleasantly surprised with the Avalon Hybrid pretty much across the board. This one was the decked out top trim level one, had unbelievably soft, supple, like kind of caramel colored leather, had real wood trim, had navigation and heated seats and cooled seats and big sunroof, all the gizmos and stuff. And I mean, I came away really feeling like, I could almost see somebody buying this over like an entry level Lexus. Because it's a really big car, it's very luxurious, really, really quiet, very comfortable. I took it to go visit my parents one weekend, and it was just an excellent highway cruiser, and it was comfortable without being like floaty and yacht like. It had a well controlled ride, and being a hybrid, it got phenomenal fuel economy. I got just under 45 miles per gallon indicated for my whole highway drive. I was like, this is,
That's amazing.
yeah, like this is crazy. This is a huge sedan, and I'm getting awesome fuel economy. Uh, it was really nice. I'm not somebody that's into like large comfy sedans necessarily, but the Avalon really was endearing itself to me.
I do think it's interesting that just how like good hybrids can be, traditional hybrids. We were talking about this on the podcast a week or two ago. You know, obviously we're looking to go full electric. Frankly, as a society, it seems like that's what automakers are doing. That's what the government is trying to enable. But it's worth noting that a traditional hybrid setup could achieve really solid fuel economy, which in some ways it'd save you money, which is some ways what really the goal is here. So I know our green editor, John Snyder, has talked about how they're a very good like near-term solution. Like if you're looking to go green, maybe look at that first. Like don't just say, wow, I need to go straight to an e-tron, because for one thing, a lot of full-on electrics are quite expensive, and you could get a traditional hybrid generally much cheaper. So yeah. And I mean the other thing too is I think the Avalon is a little bit of an underrated full-size sedan. I think it's quite good. I drove one, geez, it was probably over a year ago. If I recall, it was like probably January or February of 2020, which feels like another decade ago. And still a really good car, soldiers on. I think Toyota's got a lot of, risk-taking design elements, and they show up in the Camry and the Avalon. We were talking a couple weeks ago about how the new 86 is actually quite conservative. And we're like, it's kind of ironic that the Toyota sports car is so like buttoned down and chill. And then the sedans, the Avalon and the Camry, have some of these kind of interesting creases and like big headlights. And, there's a lot going on there. Let's put it that way. I don't think the Avalon would probably be my pick, but the Avalon Hybrid, if I did want to get a large hybrid sedan, probably would take a flyer on it.
I drove an Avalon Hybrid about 2 years ago. At this point, maybe a little less than that. And just like you, Joel, I was super pleasantly surprised by that thing. I had it for a whole weekend, and I recall my combined fuel economy. I was driving around the city, highway. I did my handling loop in it. Never dropped below 40 miles per gallon the whole time with this gigantic sedan. It's not super horrible. If you actually want to have, a slight modicum of fun with it too. I mean, it's not ponderous or anything. It's a pretty decent handling big sedan that, just like you said, has all the features that you might, like an entry-level luxury buyer might be wanting. I recall it wasn't all that cheap. I recall it was in like the mid $40,000 range for like a fully decked out hybrid. Which, you could hop into like a Lexus ES, like a fairly basic / mid-level Lexus ES for that money. But the Avalon is bigger, and, arguably there are a whole lot of other reasons. If you want to save some money, you're going to save a ton of money on gas over your time with that car. And it's just a super enjoyable car that I could see somebody, that has a pretty long commute, maybe has a kid or two that you need to move around in the back. And, it's just a very enjoyable big sedan that you don't see many on the road of either. You can go out and buy yourself a RAV4 or a Highlander, and, you'll blend in with everybody else. Or you can get this big grilled Avalon that I think looks quite stylish. So I think it's a sort of a sneaky good pick.
Cool.
Yeah, and I've driven both a TRD Avalon and this hybrid one. I kind of think my sweet spot would probably be I think it's the Avalon XSE hybrid. because it's got a little bit of the TRD sporty look to it, but it wouldn't be, because my one complaint with the TRD Avalon, while it is surprisingly fun to drive because they've taken that already pretty stiff and responsive chassis, but stiffened up the springs and shocks and things so that you get rid of the body roll and such. The problem with that is that you lose a fair bit of the ride comfort in the TRD version. And obviously the V6 doesn't get the same fuel economy. Really nice V6, but, you know, I don't know. It's still a big sedan. I don't need it to be, I don't know. It's kind of a big lazy sedan. I don't need it to be like a rocket ship. So I kind of think XSE hybrid, slightly sportier looks, still comfortable, still with the fuel economy of the hybrid, and a little cheaper than that top end, like limited high end version. I think that'd be kind of my sweet spot.
All right, so let's stay in the sedan segment and talk about our long-termer, the Acura TLX. Finally, I have multiple people on the podcast who have driven it. That's exciting. That's fun. The car arrived for me back in January, and for a while I was literally just talking to myself on the podcast. Although Zach has driven one previously, he then drove it, and now, Joel, you have gotten to get some time into it. Let's kick it over to you. I mean, new car, man. Autoblog's new car. What do you think?
Well, so far, pretty impressed across the board. The main thing that really, really impresses me is the way this car handles. It is so responsive. It's got lots of grip. Even, it's actually still on snow tires. We need to get that switched over. I was glad that we still had it on snow tires, though, with that weird bit of snow that we got a couple weeks ago. But yeah, it's got lots of grip. It's super responsive. The super handling all-wheel drive lives up to its name. It's a lot of fun. You can feel the torque split shift to the back, and you can feel that it's doing some stuff to help power you around a corner. It's a really great corner carver, and I've said responsive a couple times now, but really, like, just a little bit of dialing into the wheel, and it jumps to attention and zips into a corner. It's really impressive as far as cornering. Other stuff, I'm fine with it, but I'm looking forward to the Type S when it gets its turbo V6. The 4-cylinder power is perfectly fine. Like it's peppy. It has a lot of torque. But the engine and the transmission, I feel like, could just use a little something extra. The engine is not the nicest sounding. It's not super loud, and it's not like super rough, but it just doesn't sound, it doesn't have the silky smoothness of like a BMW 4-cylinder. It kind of sounds and feels like something that you would find in a more affordable vehicle like an Accord or Type R, which you do basically find that engine in those cars. And the 10-speed transmission is good. I wish it was better, though. I feel like it doesn't shift as fast as I want it to, especially when it's like, it's all packed into this car that has a really awesome chassis. And so, like, don't get me wrong, they're not bad. I just wish it was a little better. But yeah, overall, like, I've been enjoying driving it. I think the interior is pretty nice too. It's kind of an unusual design. I don't know if it's my favorite, but it is distinct. It's got really nice materials. I like the leather, especially the bright red seats that it has. And I like that the dash is like really low, and like you've got really good visibility. It makes it feel more airy. But yeah, there's a lot to like. What do you guys think?
Honestly, I mean, from everything you said there, it sounds like we were in complete lockstep with every single opinion about this car. Handling, check. The thing is really, really good. And then on the powertrain front, again, yeah, like there's just nothing to get excited about there. The power is extremely average, and it feels about as quick as an Accord with the 2-liter turbo, because it's very similar in, it has a little more power, but it's also heavier than the Accord. And the transmission really was the most frustrating bit for me, especially when you try and throw it into manual mode. It responds eventually when you grab a paddle, but it's not as quick as it should be. It's not as quick as any of the competitors with the ZF 8-speed automatic or Mercedes transmissions. And they could halfway make up for that if the automatic like sport mode shifting were better on a back road, but it just does not respond. It does not downshift. It does not hold gears as it should. There are some revisions that I think need to be done there, and I'll bet, as you were sort of alluding to there, that the Type S could fix most of, if not all of these quibbles with the car, and that could be like the complete package, because sure that they'll probably make the Type S handle a little bit better, but I'm not sure that it needs much more on that front as is. And this is just the A spec. It's not even the advanced with the adaptive dampers that stiffen it up even more, if that's what you're looking for. So chassis brilliant, looking forward to even more.
I think the design is really a nice showpiece, if you will, for Acura. I think they really just nailed the design for this one. I think they've spent, the better part of the last decade trying to figure out exactly how they're going to make it all hang together, if you will. Sometimes maybe going a little too far with those like train grills they were going with for a while. But I think they've got the right balance of design, gusto, but also without being too crazy. So I think that's like true to who they are. When you buy an Acura, that's what you're looking for. You're maybe not the flashiest thing, but also you want to have some sort of, style making, if you will. I would agree with basically what you guys said. I thought the paddle shifters helped sort out the transmission a little bit. If you want to sort of work for it, theoretically you shouldn't have to work for it, if you will. I think in this day and age, you want your powertrain to be, sort of well sorted on its own. But I was able to find some performance more to my liking by just simply working the shifts that way. Chassis good. Interior, I don't think I like the interior quite as much as you guys did, but that's that's just my taste. But Zach, you did do kind of a sidebar here on the infotainment, which I think is probably the most polarizing thing, because I think we're all in the same within standard variants here on most main points. But the infotainment's a bit polarizing. So why don't you kind of recap your review of it?
Yeah, so I did an infotainment review. Basically, it applies to this TLX, but it applies to pretty much every modern Acura in general. Now you get the TLX, RDX, and MDX with this. The ILX still doesn't have it, but just wait probably another year or two. And we had plenty of discussions before about, some of us like this, the way that they go about it. Some of us don't. And the really controversial part about it, I think, is just the ultimate the ultimate positioning strategy that they use to control the screen. So it's not like a traditional touchpad. It's you put your finger on the right corner of the screen, and that highlights the icon on the right, and then you press down and then you select it. If you treat it like a touchpad, like swipe to the right and then take your finger off and press it, you lose your cursor, so to speak. And it's annoying, and it takes time to get used to it, I think. And that was really the main point that I made in my review, is that for like the first week or two that I was using this infotainment system and putting a lot of miles on the car and driving it, like I was pretty annoyed, just because, you make a lot of misclicks. You're figuring out, where exactly your hand needs to be on the pad to do what you need to do. Sometimes you might have it just a little too far over to the right or a little too far over to the left, and you click the wrong thing, and that's just frustrating. But after, like a full month in the car, I was pretty pleased with it. I wasn't making any mistakes anymore. And, with the technology as it is, where you can just quickly navigate to a certain part of the screen without having to swipe over and over, I found it's quicker and, a pretty nifty way to go about using it. Besides that, the infotainment system itself is, relatively bare bones because of this technology. They keep it simple with the icons and the controls on screen, which I appreciate. Sometimes you'll get in a car, any Mercedes with M bucks these days, and you'll be quickly overwhelmed with what you're met with. But this is very, very simple. There are not, a whole lot of superfluous programs on here that will bog you down. And I also appreciate that, they have a nice little volume knob right there, right next to that touchpad that you can use. Feels good, really good placement. And there's a nice skip track as well. I normally listen to Spotify when I'm in a car. So that's perfect for my usage. Just skip, go back to songs, and yeah, it just made the whole experience very, very intuitive. It just took time to do it. That's really the main thing. So like hopping into this car in a dealership, could very well see somebody just get annoyed right off the bat and just not like it. And that's something that I guess Acura is betting on people not getting annoyed by. I'm not sure that bet will pay off if somebody's buying a car for the infotainment system. But yeah, would love to hear your guys' thoughts too.
I got into it and was pretty annoyed. So I think I followed the column A right there. And I will say this, I had the car for about a month and rolled up some miles on it. I have driven one or two cars the last few years, if I may. So it's like, I feel like if you're losing me, you're maybe not losing everybody, but you're losing at least some people. Let me put it that way. Maybe I fall into more of the, grouchy, old man yelling at clouds. Maybe not, but I would say this, and my views on this system have actually, I'd say, moderated a little bit. I think I could probably come around to it by probably spending more time and getting accustomed to it. That's where I would land. But I'll say this, I got in the Mach-E and was able to change multiple things about the powertrain and the setting of the car. It paired my phone while in motion, which you're not supposed to do, barely even looking at it. Whereas with the Acura, it was just like, oh my God, how do I get from XM to FM to, just changing the radio, things like that, maybe are pretty obvious to the more tech savvy. But like I would say this, I've moderated on this a little bit. I definitely can see some of the ways it's intended to work and it's supposed to work. So I think the way I bring it together is it still shouldn't be this hard, and it's, but maybe not quite as bad as I initially thought. So that's my take. What do you think, Joel?
I think I'm a little bit in between you guys, but leaning more towards Zach's opinion on this. Because I agree, like, when you first get into it, it's a weird system, and because it doesn't really function like much else on the market right now. And so there's absolutely a learning curve. But there were a number of things that I learned to like about it once I did have more experience with it. For one thing, I do like how responsive it is. basically the second your finger touches that pad, you can see what's been highlighted on the screen. There's really no delay. It's a very responsive system, and I like that a lot. And I kind of liked that with that like kind of fixed positioning on the touchpad, that sometimes it almost felt like I was using like a physical button to get to certain things, because I could see like where it is on the screen, and I would know exactly where I need to tap on the touchpad to actually click it, instead of having to like put my finger on the touchpad, navigate the cursor over to what I want to click. I can just like tap the button. I can basically use the touchpad as a button, because it does have a physical click down for activating functions. And that was kind of nice. I kind of liked that I could just like, okay, I can see where it is. I just press it and it's good. And those are things that I like about it. And even like, if you do still prefer more of a cursor kind of thing, like if you put your finger on the touchpad, you'll immediately see like what you've highlighted, and you can drag your finger to other things. You don't have to like nail it on every press. If you're a little bit off, you just move your finger over a little bit and you're good. But there are still some things that could use a little bit of working. Actually, with Greg, when you mentioned like switching from Sirius XM to like FM or something, that was actually something that kind of mixed me up a little bit on a recent drive of mine, because I was trying to switch between the two, and this might be something where like if you rearrange your shortcuts and stuff and have it more set up for your own needs, it wouldn't be that big of a deal. But I went to kind of like click on FM radio, and then I didn't see any kind of buttons or anything for changing the source. So I think some of so it took me a little while to figure out, okay, I need to find where I can actually change what my audio input is. And so I think there are still some like menu things that could use a little bit of sorting out, that some of that's not as intuitive as it should be. But that's more of kind of an issue with like the menu layout as opposed to the actual concept. But I do think something that could maybe help out with the touchpad a little bit is if there was some kind of like haptic feedback thing that would let you know as you're kind of like rolling over different selections. So if there was like just a little subtle vibration as you're like moving your finger over through the touchpad to indicate that you're pointing at something else on the screen. Kind of like with the old Lexus mouse thing, little mouse nub. Because that would like, that had a little like haptic kind of, for lack of a better word, stickiness. Like if you moved over to something, you could feel like kind of this little nudge in the nub that would tell you that you had highlighted something. And like if you pressed it a little bit more, there'd be a little bit of resistance, and then it would kind of like have this sort of jump feeling when you moved over to the next selection. If there was some kind of like little vibration in the pad to kind of indicate when you were like moving through selections, I think that would be nice a little bit and kind of help with navigation, especially as you're still learning the system. I think that would be a nice thing, especially because we've come such a long way with haptic feedback. I mean, the fact that like on Apple computer, it doesn't actually have a physical clicking button on the touchpad. It's a haptic click, and it feels like the real thing. I'd like to see something like that in it. But yeah, summing up, I think I actually do like the Acura concept, and once I've kind of gotten used to it, I do enjoy it. But I do agree there's a learning curve, and that's not a great thing if you're trying to sell a car and somebody comes in the showroom and is like, well, I just don't understand this. I mean, like, are you really going to believe the salesman that like, no, trust me, just give it like a week or two.
I think you actually summed it up the best I've heard anybody sum up the Acura infotainment situation. In doing some quick just research here, I'm noticing everything from people love it to hate it, depending on basically who you talk to at what publication. But I think you summed it up really well there, Joel, with the fact that, yeah, there are some benefits to this if you want to invest the time to do it. But maybe you shouldn't have to invest as much time as they sort of require some people to do. So that's a good way to put it. And, we'll play with it, keep the car for a year.
It's a little bit like trying to get someone to watch a TV show, and you're like, listen, the first season is rough. Once you get past the first season, it really comes around.
Yeah,
and they're not wrong, but it's also a bit of an ask.
There you go. That's like if you ever have watched the first season of The Office, it's borderline cringeworthy for many of the episodes, but it's only like 6 episodes. The problem is I would argue the Acura Infotainment is more like a Ken Burns documentary you have to get through before you understand how the heck to get it to work. I digress. Let's talk about some news. Real quick, Hyundai Kona N, that was the news of the day. Joel, take us through it. What do you think?
Well, so it kind of felt like we'd already seen it by now, because they'd given out a number of like teaser photos that showed quite a bit of the car, and we already kind of knew what was going to power it. But either way, it's still a car that I think a lot of us are excited about. It's basically a Hyundai Veloster N in a more practical package. It's got the same 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder. It makes 276 horsepower, and sadly, it's only available with the 8-speed dual-clutch transmission, but as one of our other editors, Byron Hurd, experienced with the Veloster N with the same transmission, it's still a lot of fun. And I mean, that's kind of the high-level thing. It's basically a more practical Veloster N, and I think it looks pretty cool too. It gets these nifty little, I think actually kind of Audi Quattro Coupe esque vents just above the main grille. It's got the triangular brake light in the back like all the other N models. It's got 2 fat exhaust tips out the back. It looks like a lot of fun. It'll also be interesting to see how the sales compare to the Veloster N, because this is much more of a broadly appealing package. It has 4 actual doors as opposed to 3 for getting in and out, and it's got a traditional hatchback shape. I kind of wonder if it's going to outsell the Veloster, which would make me kind of sad, because the Veloster I still think looks a lot cooler. And the Veloster you can get with a 6-speed manual.
I think that's a pretty interesting breakdown there of Hyundai's like lineup here. I think it's cool that they actually are investing in the N line at all. They've said, hey, we want to have some performance chops, and they're doing it, like I said, across the lineup. So, any thoughts on this, Zach?
Yeah,
or Joel, go ahead.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, and talking about investing in the N brand, Hyundai says that it plans to increase the number of N and inline models sold globally from what it is now up to 18 models. And we know a couple of the ones that are coming. We know that the Elantra is getting a full N version. The Sonata is getting an inline. And the Tucson is getting at least an inline. It might get a full N model. We're not 100% sure on that yet. And they've said that they're interested in adding like electric and fuel cell models in the future.
Cool.
Yeah, no, I'm super, super excited with this car. I drove the Veloster N. It's been about a year and a half at this point, and was blown away with how good that car was and how fun it was. And seeing the current lack of performance crossovers in the non-luxury space, this will be an affordable crossover that actually has real performance. And that makes me really, really excited to see that. And I know, just because it's sharing so much with the Veloster N, that this car is probably going to be very, very good to drive. Just the regular Kona as it is, with its 1.6 turbo, is already a semi good car to drive. It's one of the more fun of that small crossover segment. And now you add this 2-liter turbo and an awesome dual clutch transmission. I know that you didn't mention that if it was front wheel drive or all wheel drive there, Joel. I'm assuming that it's front wheel drive, right?
Yeah, technically they haven't said
Yeah.
clearly that all-wheel drive is not happening, but it's not happening. Oh, actually, no, wait,
Yeah.
I correct myself. No, it is not going to be all-wheel drive.
Gotcha.
And apparently the reason for that is that it would have added cost and weight and complexity that they didn't want to add. I'm guessing probably a lot of that was the cost thing, because I
Yeah.
mean, like, you don't necessarily have a driveline for this engine setup, like, because like the Veloster is front wheel drive only. It's like you don't necessarily want to design a whole extra powertrain that's only used in this one model.
Yep.
Which actually is one of the things that makes me surprised that they're not putting the regular manual transmission in it, because it's like, you have that, it's legal for the US, you sell it here, why not spread that cost out over another model? Granted, I'm guessing it's not the highest demand, and I'm sure that they figure, well, if you want the manual, you're probably going to buy the Veloster anyway. But I don't know. I guess sometimes I worry that the Veloster will just end up being discontinued altogether, because it's not a huge seller, which is a shame because it is a nice car and it looks cool. Um, but then again, I mean, Hyundai shows that it's willing to put money into things that other automakers would probably drop altogether. And like, there have been multiple times that I've talked with like Hyundai PR people that talk about the Veloster being a quote reverse Halo vehicle, that like it is an image car, but it's also an image car that is like affordable and lots of people could get if they want it.
Yeah, something, that line of thinking really makes me think that they're not going to drop the Veloster N. That would sort of be like, Honda dropping the Civic Si and just stopping making the Si. It's like, well, this is your small, affordable sports car. And if you drop that, well, that sort of, reduces your credibility elsewhere. And that makes the Kona N less cool, so to speak. It doesn't make it a worse car. It just, that N lineup, that N pedigree, comes from something. And right now it's derived from the Veloster N. And, you're sort of gifting the Kona N with that goodness. And you really, I mean, if you want a performance brand to have, like real performance cachet, I feel like you need that bread and butter sports car. Like BMW is going to keep the M3 around ad infinitum. The N performance brand launched via Hyundai with the Veloster N. To get rid of that, yeah, no, I just don't see that happening at all. So hopefully they would just keep expanding it, like you said, a whole lot more. N seems to be a very, very good thing. So more of them. I welcome all of them.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're executing the cars well, which is something that, a brand like Hyundai that doesn't have a deep history in performance, you sometimes wonder, hey, how's it going to all come together? But I drove the Veloster N last summer, I want to say, in a beautiful like sky blue color is what resonates with me, if I recall. And it's a lot of fun. These cars steer well, they handle well, they look the part. So yeah, more power to Hyundai. They're doing it right. Let's talk quickly. You guys think Lincoln needs a Zephyr?
That's a really tough question. I mean, if I just go and look at Continental sales, the quick answer is no. Lincoln does not need another gas-powered big sedan. If the Zephyr were electric, you could probably convince me that if you made like a full flagship electric car that was sort of like the Mercedes EQS that just launched, I would be super excited about that thing. But I just don't see. I mean, at this point, if you just launch another, it's almost would feel like a reboot of the Continental. or like a redesigned MKZ, which they're absolutely not doing. I just don't think it would fit what Lincoln is doing right now. So it's my long and short of it.
Over to you, Joel.
Lincoln doesn't need it. Like, don't get me wrong. I think it looks excellent. I think it would be very cool if they sold it here. But that's just not where the market is. Like Zach said, the Continental did not sell great. And I mean, the MKZ is not exactly a huge seller either. Like what Lincoln has been doing lately with emphasizing their SUVs and stuff. I mean, they're almost an all SUV lineup except for like any remaining MKZs out there. That's working. Like that's what they need to do. Like what they need is, I think, is a version of the Mach-E to sell. I mean, you've got this great electric car platform that you can make a really good looking car on. I would love to see Lincoln make a version of the Mach-E for themselves. And I think you could probably incorporate a lot of the design cues from the Zephyr, which I think look great. But Lincoln really does not need another sedan right now. And like if they did do a sedan, I would think that my thinking is that they would need to make it like a crazy halo kind of sedan. Kind of like the production version of one of those Cadillac concepts from like the last 10 years, like the El Mirage and the CL and things like that. Like it should be it maybe make it electric too. Like just go all out on it, because you're not going to sell a lot anyway. Just sell the ones that you can. Just let it be an image car. But something like the Zephyr, which looks like it's probably kind of a mid-size sedan, kind of MKZ thing, like that's not going to do it for Lincoln. It's not going to be worth the effort and time, I don't think.
And you drove the Continental with the flip-out doors, if I recall right. You were the coach, built doors, whatever they called that thing. You were you probably are the last Autoblog editor to drive the Lincoln Continental.
Yeah. I'd almost be one of the only ones, because I don't know if we ever got a test car through.
That's true. We had the Continental like once, but it was so long ago that I don't recall what we even did with it. So yeah, check out my piece. I actually disagree with these guys, although I would say my position is actually quite similar to Zach's. I just sort of reach a different conclusion using the same evidence. I won't get into it too much because we did touch on this last week. I think the Zephyr name works because it's so old that you probably have no idea they ever used this on a car, except for the one time they did it 15 years ago. You definitely probably don't remember when they used it from like 36 to 42, when it was replaced by, you guessed it, the Continental. That's how old Zephyr is. It was the forerunner of the Continental. I will agree with you there, Joel, that they don't need to do like internal combustion, mid-size to large sedan. That's not all that they need to do. I argue they should do an electric Zephyr, but don't make it so much of this halo thing. Just make it like an e-tron fighter, something like that, an e-tron GT fighter, which I think they could do. They could take the Mach-E underpinnings, maybe don't make it a crossover, just give it a different silhouette, and there you go. I think they've got the design down cold here. And like I said, the Zephyr is a pretty good name. So if you want to read more on what I wrote, check it out. It's on the site. If you disagree, then maybe hit up Joel and Zach on Twitter, and they will commiserate with you as well over why Lincoln doesn't need any more cars. So with that, let's spend some money. This is Return Writer, so that's good. What he's doing is looking to get some advice for his fiancée. This is Joe. He says his fiancée will be getting her license shortly, and she's going to need a first car. Commuting a little ways, but not crazy. So we're talking about 50 miles a day on average. This is going to be like a second car in the family, looking for something reliable, comfortable, fairly efficient. Price range is flexible, but we're looking at 10 grand to 20 grand. So we're looking for a good value play here. Prefer new or CPO. Used cars are expensive right now, but it's a thing. Must have Apple CarPlay or allow the stereo to be replaced to add it off the shelf, if you will. He lays out his fiance's tastes here. She likes cars that are cute and unique. That's a direct quote from the letter here from them. They like city cars like the Beetle, the Mini, things like that. Also looking at the Jeep Wrangler, which is actually a pretty compact sort of vehicle, if you will. Very garageable if you need to, unless you get some crazy lift kit, which doesn't sound like that's a thing. The question is, how do you feel about the value for money of these CPO-ish cars that you could get in this time frame that would fit the budget, specifically the Beetle and the Mini? What other small, mid-sized cars or crossovers from, say, the last decade might fit this? Also looking for a car that might have kind of a fun color, that sort of thing. One quick update here, though. Joe did end up buying a beautiful blue 2017 Mazda 3, and it is the greatest thing in the world. So thanks for that update. That's some advice we gave quite some time ago, but glad to hear that you took it there, Joe. Appreciate it. So with that, we will sick you guys on this question. It's a meaty one. A lot of ways you could go here. But to me, I have more questions than perhaps answers. Let's kick it over to you, Joel. You're usually the spend my money ace.
Okay, so yeah, the gears are turning. First off, congrats on the Mazda 3. Honestly, it sounds like you have basically the same car that my parents got, and my parents love theirs also, with the 2.5 liter and the manual transmission. Like they love it. They love the way it drives. They love the way it looks, and with good reason, because it's a good car. All of us like it here. So for $10,000 to $20,000, I think actually you're going to have a surprising number of options to pick from. And honestly, I think certified pre-owned would be a good way to go, because it would be cheaper than new, but you also get kind of a little extra inspection and a little bit, and frequently a warranty of some sorts offered by the manufacturer and dealer that would make it very appealing. And as for kind of cute, fun little things and bright colors, honestly, Mini Cooper is right up there. And like the base Minis, as a number of us have learned in the last year or two, are some of the best Minis. They're not like rock hard and stiff like the S and John Cooper Works. They feel actually peppier than the numbers would suggest. They get good fuel economy and they're really affordable. So those are a great way to go, and you can find them in a lot of different colors. They're very distinctly designed. Maybe if you're looking for a bit more space, possibly look for like a Fiat 500X or even a Jeep Renegade, both of which are, well, actually almost the same vehicle, just your choice of round or boxy. But they both are available in a number of colors, and they offer more space and flexibility because they're four doors and they're a little bit bigger than like a Mini or even a regular Fiat 500. They're available with all-wheel drive. They drive solidly. They're not amazing, but like if you're looking for something distinctive looking and fun, they're really not bad. And for that matter, even a regular Fiat 500 could be fun. The Abarth is a hoot. Slightly limited color. Well, no, you can get it in some pretty interesting colors. Most people bought them in black, white, or red for the most part. But you can find them in yellow, pale blue, bright blue, kind of a army green. The thing about those, though, is that they are very, very small. They're effectively two-person cars, but it's something to think about. I think, though, probably a Mini Cooper or like Fiat 500X, Jeep Renegade might be good things to look at. Yeah, not maybe even a Chevy Sonic. It's not necessarily cute. It's got more of an aggressive look to it, but it's not a bad driver, and it's affordable, offers a fair amount of space. But so I think those are kind of some early ideas. What about you guys?
Over to you, Zach.
Yeah. Yeah. So Joel, I think you hit a lot of really good gas engine options. I'm going to run with where he said interested in electric. And I also see, you want something cute, unique. My mind instantly goes to the BMW i3 as a really, really good option for something that is cute. And I was looking up some color options as well, because it looks like you want something in an interesting color. And while the i3 is mostly offered in generally white, gray, black, there was a really bright blue that looks really good. It was a bright red. And recently they introduced a yellow as well that looks really cool. And those have been really falling in price as of late. You could probably get a really good one right around 20,000 or in the high teens with decent miles. And just everything about that car I really, really love. It has, arguably one of the best interiors in all of cars still. And it does have Apple CarPlay. It does not have Android Auto. So I hope that's not on your list. But and it also hits the commuting goal under 50 miles a day on average. If you get one of these, you're going to get, probably just over 100 or probably around 100 in the wintertime if you live somewhere cold. So that should be enough. And you can also probably get one CPO through BMW for a decent deal. So if you're willing to go electric, I think that a used or certified pre-owned i3 is the way to go. There are probably not a ton of them out there in the really interesting colors, but if you're patient, wait your time, and just keep a lookout out there. I bet that you could find one that is in an interesting color on top of having all of the features that you like. And yeah, they're so cute. I love the way these things look, and I'm sure that you and your fiance will too.
And actually, I just want to jump in really quick because thinking of electric cars, I can't believe I completely forgot about this. The Chevy Bolt EV.
You just took my option. I was just thinking how smart I am. I'm like, I came up with this one that neither one of them did. I've got this play, and then no. Go ahead, Joel.
Oh, and then in the back of my mind, I was like, I hope I'm not stealing this from Greg.
Yeah.
Because you can actually find them all day long around here, at least around here in Metro Detroit, for under $20,000, and that's a 230-mile range EV with a really peppy motor. It's 200 horsepower and 250 plus pound-feet of torque. It's got a lot of space. You can fit a lot into these things. They're small and maneuverable and are actually pretty fun to drive. And you can actually get them in pretty neat colors. Right now, you can find them in this fantastic robin's egg blue color that I adore. They've also had orange ones and a crazy tennis ball green one. It's actually really nice. The one thing that I will mention is, which in your use case maybe not a big deal, and so you could maybe ignore it, but in case anybody else is looking at them, make sure that when you're looking at them, if DC fast charging is available on them, it was not standard. It is an option. And so there are ones out there that do not have it. You can actually tell really easily if you go and look at one, pop open the charging door, and if it has DC fast charging, you'll have kind of a little circular port with kind of a squarish shaped one right underneath it. If it doesn't have it, it should just be the circle part. But yeah, if you're not going to take it on long road trips, it's not a big deal if you don't have DC fast charging, but just something to keep an eye out for. But otherwise, the Bolt is a lot of fun. Sorry, Greg.
No, you made my answer easy. Same. So yeah, I think that's my answer. I think the Bolt is a pretty good car. I'm actually surprised how attainable they are, considering that, when they launched, it was like, this is GM's electric car, look at all this range you can get on it. And then the new version, I think, is, they've made it a little bit better, frankly, as far as offering like a variant, the EUV, if you will, make it a utility. But used ones are like out there. I mean, I'm seeing like surprisingly cheap versions that actually fit right, in the budget here. I mean, I'm seeing one in Waterbury, Connecticut for $16,000. That seems like a pretty good deal for me on a car that's about 3 years old. Here's one that's got, it's about $23,000, but it's only got about 9,000 miles on it for a 2020 Bolt. This is a car that was, for a minute, sort of on the cutting edge. So, if you're looking for an electric car, this is a nice way to get into the segment. But I will say this, Joel, I had forgotten about the DC charging element of it. So I will give you props for pointing that out, because that's a really good point, something I probably wouldn't have remembered in my recommendation. And I will circle back and say there's a lot of good used Minis out there. Obviously, you got to look to see which ones have Apple CarPlay. And you can go a variety of sizes here, whether you get like the traditional Mini or even step up to like used Countryman's. If you're willing to take some miles, you can comfortably get them in that price range. So those would be my two recommendations. And that's all the time we have. This is a good podcast. Thanks for writing, Joe. Thanks for joining this week, Zach and Joel. You guys be safe out there. Send your Spend My Monies to podcast@autoblog.com, and we will see you next week.